Okay, on to tonight. Religious freedom, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble peaceably, the freedom to voice dissenting opinions, the knowledge that these are our unalienable rights. And we all know that these sacred rights are under attack, but what are we doing about it? That's what we're going to speak about tonight. America, the light and hope of the world, a nation founded under divine providence. It has been the voice of freedom, the defender of the oppressed, and a sanctuary where people of all faiths come to practice their religious beliefs without persecution or government interference. America, the great beacon of hope, a beacon whose light shines bright due to the sacrifices of so many who have come before us. She's now faced with the threat of those who would diminish her greatness, deny her heritage, extinguish that beacon, and plunge the world into darkness. It was December 1620, 393 years ago, when the ship reached the Massachusetts shoreline. Its passengers had left everything behind, risked a perilous voyage to escape religious persecution, and arrived in a strange new world, hoping just for a chance to practice their religious faith in peace. My friends, when the Pilgrims stepped off the Mayflower at Plymouth Rock, the seeds of religious freedom were planted on American soil. July 4th, 1776, 156 years later, brave visionaries proclaimed the new concept of government to the world, declaring that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights, granted by their Creator, not by any government. And in December 1791, the Bill of Rights was finally ratified, the First Amendment thereof proclaiming, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." Religious freedom is at the very bedrock of our republic. It is part and parcel of who we are as Americans. And as such, we thought it could never, ever be challenged in this nation. In 2012, after decades of incremental erosion of our rights, our government took direct action against the Catholic Church in the implementation of Obamacare, and in doing so, put every religious organization on notice. Kathleen Sebelius, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, an unelected bureaucrat, has decreed that our First Amendment right to practice our religion in conformance with our conscience, a right enshrined in the First Amendment of the Constitution and with roots going back to the Magna Carta, must be rendered null and void when considerations are given to certain rights as formulated in the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Our government, in its current composition, has failed us. Congress has allowed legislation to be put into place, leaving decisions which impact the very foundation of our republic to bureaucrats who are unanswerable to the American people. The executive branch has overstepped its constitutional authority, ruling by fiat and imposing its soft tyranny on the public. The judiciary, our last line of defense in our systems of checks and balances, has forsaken its role to uphold the Constitution. After rendering his tortuous legalistic contortions to uphold the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Chief Justice Roberts admonished the American people, and I quote, "Members of this court are vested with the authority to interpret the law. We possess neither the expertise nor the prerogative to make policy judgments. Those decisions are entrusted to the nation's elected leaders, who can be thrown out of office if the people disagree with them. It is not our job to protect the people from the consequences of their political actions." End quote. And so here we stand, the last line of defense, the last possible hope for the restoration of our republic to the founders' intent. We the people, and especially those of us who identify ourselves as people of faith, and those of us who are involved in grassroots politics, we must make a stand. We must speak out, frame the narrative, and become impervious to the demonization that the mainstream media has perpetuated against us. You know, we cannot speak about an attack on our religious freedom without addressing an overall problem in our nation. A fundamental erosion of the founding principles, a turning away from God, and the corruption of our system of government by those who seek only power and personal gain at the expense of the people and of the nation. Now, just to be clear, I'm Roman Catholic, so I address this issue from that perspective. With that being said, let's understand a few things. The problem we face is not a Catholic problem, and it is not a problem about contraception, even though it's the Catholic Church that's clearly in the crosshairs on this issue. No, this is a problem for all people of faith. Understand that the Catholic Church, with its hierarchy of authority and its moral absolutism, is the largest obstacle standing in the way of a progressive secular ideology intent on subjugating religion to the decrees of the state. Let me put it this way. When a bully enters a schoolyard and he beats up the largest child there, he ensures that everyone else will be intimidated and succumb to his demands. If the Catholic Church is forced to bow down to the state, rest assured that the state will tolerate no deviation from its demands from any other religious organization. So this issue concerns all people of faith, all Christian denominations, and likewise all our Jewish brothers and sisters, who should understand better than all of us the evil that can be perpetrated when good people choose to remain silent. And suffice it to say that if the government can deny us our freedom of religion, it can deny us every freedom we have. I believe it's important to note that this direct attack against our freedom to worship in accordance with our conscience did not materialize in a vacuum. It is a part and parcel of a progressive ideology that promotes big government taking decisions out of the hands of individuals, that recognizes an elite ruling class that knows what is best for all of us, and that looks at the Constitution and our Judeo-Christian heritage as archaic roadblocks to its agenda. If we are to safeguard our freedom of religion, it must be part of an overall effort to safeguard all of our freedoms, to uphold the Constitution as the founding document of our republic, to return to our founding principles, to restore the virtue of personal responsibility, and to stop this progressive ideology from fundamentally changing America. You know, when Thomas Jefferson had enumerated the grievances against King George in the Declaration of Independence, he went on to write the following words. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose very character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people, end quote. Words from the Declaration of Independence. Words from a people who had grown weary of the oppression of a tyrant, who had tried petitions, reason, and gentlemanly arguments, and who had finally resolved to rid themselves of the burdens of an oppressive government. My friends, in case you haven't noticed, we today find ourselves in similar straits. We have petitioned, we have argued, we have protested, we have beseeched our duly elected representatives for intervention and relief, and our petitions have resulted in repeated injury. The Obama administration emboldened by the refusal of the opposition party to hold them accountable, has doubled down on their earlier transgressions against our freedom. Our government, a government which supposedly derives its just power to govern from the consent of the people, is now spying on the people. It has used the full force of the IRS to intimidate and stifle opposition speech. It has begun a process of eliminating our freedom to practice our religion in accordance with our conscience. And it has decided that it will have its way, bypassing Congress and bypassing the courts, to impose its soft tyranny on the public. We have reached a time and a place unthinkable only a few short years ago. I suggest to you, if the Republican Party were the true opposition party, it would be our refuge and our fallback position in these dire times. But that is not the case. The Republican establishment has shown its true colors. They are content with their position as the second-class ruling party, and they will fight harder and stronger against conservatives who challenge them than they will against the so-called opposition in the Democrat Party. If you listen to their speech, they don't speak about the Tea Party people by saying, oh, they're great people. We just disagree with their positions. No. They label us as extremists. Mitch McConnell says we should be punched in the nose. I mean, the verbiage, the things they say about us, the things they will say about Dave and about Rick and about Turk and any of the people who are challenging an establishment are far more vile, far more vicious than anything they will say about the administration or about any Democrats. And that is because we have core beliefs and we are a threat to their position. Even though their position, they're content to be second class as long as they have their own little power fiefdoms. And the only way we change that is through primaries and elections and by working and action. Take that to heart. That's the only place you're going to make a difference. You see, if we do not learn to fight together, to fight boldly, and to play by the ground rules initiated by the left, we will soon be unable to fight. We can no longer afford to be single-issue voters. It's all about freedom. Pro-life, religious freedom, Second Amendment defenders, immigration control, parental rights, school choice, on and on and on. It's about freedom. We must support each other in this battle, and we must bring this battle into the open, in their face. In the words of Benjamin Franklin, we must all hang together, or assuredly we will all hang separately. Where is the outcry against so blatant attack against our basic freedoms? Where are the voices of our so-called representatives? And where are the protests and the raised voices of the citizens who sit and watch reality TV while their children's future is being stolen, and the culture which their fathers and grandfathers died for erodes under moral decay? And where are our religious leaders? In the words of Ronald Reagan, to sit back hoping that someday, some way, someone else will make things right, is to go on feeding the crocodile, hoping he will eat you last, but eat you he will. I have been critical of the church hierarchy and some of the laity for having been virtually silent about what I perceived as the erosions of our liberties and the intrusion of government into our lives for some time now. They have been feeding the crocodile and hoping that he will come for them last. The edicts coming down from the administration as part of the implementation of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act has been a shot across the bow of the church and a harbinger of the dangers facing both the church and the nation as we contemplate the unthinkable, a denial of our First Amendment rights. For the church fathers, I think they realize the crocodile has finally come for them, and they have mobilized to defend their sacred turf. However, it may be too little, too late. Yes, there's some mumbling opposition, but it's far too intermittent and it's far too lukewarm in its tenor. When the church is more concerned with being politically correct, too wrapped up in the terms social justice, which when sold by the left is merely income redistribution and the wholesale subjugation of entire groups of citizens to dependence on the state for its magnificent largesse, and too afraid of losing congregants for preaching the word of God, then where, oh, where is the moral high ground? My friends, I found a phrase a few years ago that I have adopted as my mantra, and it's taken from Virgil's Aeneid. The Latin is, audentes fortuna juvat. Fortune favors the bold. Audentes fortuna juvat. My friends, we have been taught that the meek shall inherit the earth. But I suggest it is the bold who are going to determine exactly what that inheritance is going to look like. So if you care about the future of your children, if you have a vision for what you want to leave them, then you can't leave it in the hands of anybody else who has totally opposite opinions of what your children and children should grow up as. And you cannot sit meekly on the sidelines lamenting deterioration of our society. You have got to get up and you have to get involved. When are people going to understand that we are fighting for our freedom? And if we won't fight for our freedom, tell me, my friends, what will we fight for? You remember the movie Braveheart? Good old Mel Gibson. And the famous words of William Wallace as he had his troops ready for the Battle of Stirling. Aye, fight and you may die. Run and you will live, at least for a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you give all the days from this to that to come back here for one chance, just one chance, to speak to our enemies and tell them, you may take our lives, but you will never take our freedom? Is that rhetoric too harsh for the battle we're in now? I give you the words of Barry Goldwater. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. We have inherited the American dream because of the sacrifices of those who have come before us. We are now the stewards of that dream. What, oh, what will we leave for future generations? My friends, imagine, if you will, the future that you leave to your children, the inheritance that you pass down to your grandchildren. Will future generations be dependent on an all-powerful government for their health care, their livelihood, their education, their housing, their every need, yet give up more and more of their treasure, more of their responsibility, more of their choices, and yes, more of their liberty? Or will they be the makers of their own dream, determining their own future, able to do whatever they want to be, able to worship their God in the way that they want, and with the ability to achieve the unbridled success that is here in this country if they're willing to make the sacrifices and do the things that are necessary, those opportunities that we all had? What will the choice be? Only you can change the direction of our republic. Only you can shape the future that we leave for our children. So what do we do? How do we stop the slide? How do we reverse direction? Just how bold can we be under the so-called separation of church and state? Are we allowed to express our belief in the sanctity of life, in the freedom of religious expression, in human dignity? Aren't we supposed to separate our religious beliefs from our political actions? Let me quote you from the Gospel according to Dick. We have been taught, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. But when Caesar condones the murder of innocent children, when Caesar strips the citizens of every vestige of self-respect, condemning generation after generation to believe that only Caesar can care for them, depriving them of the very human dignity that comes with self-reliance and personal responsibility, and takes their every freedom in return for his largesse. And when Caesar calls for people of faith to abandon their consciences and to bow down to the decrees of the state, then it is time when we, as citizens of this country, when we, as people of faith, must raise our voices and say, "No, Caesar, this will not stand." Let's talk about what we can do. First, the easy things. Continue to put pressure on your representatives. Write, call, email, show up at their offices, make noise, learn from the left. They've got this down to a science. Watch what they do and follow suit. The stakes are certainly worth fighting for. Second, a little bit harder. Visit your priests, your ministers, and your rabbis. Let them know your concerns. Why aren't they speaking out against these attacks on our faith? Why aren't they preaching the Word of God as it relates to the politics in our nation? Are they afraid of losing liberal parishioners and their donations? Make it crystal clear to them that you're offended by the lack of moral leadership. Let them know that they will lose you and your contributions. Better yet, organize. Get together with like-minded individuals to accompany you. Ask for a group meeting to discuss the role of the church in this battle. Remind them of the Black Robe Regiment that was so instrumental in the American Revolution. And if they speak of their losing their tax exemption, let me tell you what I did. I was speaking to a priest and arguing about why aren't they saying what has to be said. And he said, "Nick, you know, it's nice, it's easy for you to say, you say what you want." He goes, "I have to worry about losing my tax status." I says, "Father, let me ask you a question. You and I walk away from here and we both get hit by a bus. And the next thing we know, we're facing our God in heaven. Now, I'm comfortable saying, maybe I was a little too passionate, maybe I was a little too loud, but you know what? I said what had to be said. Father, are you comfortable looking God in the face and saying, I was worried about our tax status?" He turned and he walked away. The truth hurts. Things have to be said, and nobody wants to say them. Be the ones to say them. And last, this is the hard part. This is where everybody's going to get uncomfortable. But unfortunately, you're going to hear it. Take back your schools. Think about it. When did we decide that it was okay for other people to decide where, when, and how our children could practice their faith? When did we relinquish our rights and our obligations as parents? Tell me, how do we allow little Susie to be told by her teacher that her essay is unacceptable because she mentions God? When did it become okay for someone to tell Tommy and his friends that they couldn't just kneel down and pray on the football field? And why would we allow John or Mary to be told that they could not reference their faith at an assembly because, God forbid, it would what's the word? What's the word? Offend, thank you. It might offend some of the students there. You know, we wring our hands and we say how terrible it is, but that just doesn't cut it. Our failure to respond emboldens people to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And before you know it, we wind up on our butts and other people are controlling our children. They're taking over their minds, they're indoctrinating them, they're telling them what they can and what they can't do. That's happened in other parts of the world and the results are not pretty. So I suggest we take another tact. Why don't we go with Susie to her teacher and confront him or her on their intolerance? And when that doesn't work, demand to go to the principal and then the superintendent. And when we still have no satisfaction, gather your like-minded friends and family and go to the homes of your school board members and protest. Bring signs. Bring out the press. Accuse them of being the intolerant, bigots, and fascists that they are. Let them see how it feels to have the tables turned. Put the pressure on them. Control the narrative. Call it what it is and watch them squirm. And stand with your children on the football field. Stand with them at the podium. Demonstrate. Demand and never accept no for an answer. Let them pull you and your children off the field. Let them come and arrest you and your children from the podium. And let this happen all across the country, not just in New York and D.C. and San Francisco. No, across the fruited plain. Tell me, what will the reaction be across the great red states of this country? Are people going to hear this news about people being arrested with their kids and say, oh, they got what they deserve? Or are people going to say, damn it, it's about time somebody stood up for their children and their faith? I suggest to you it'll be the latter. When you do this, you embolden others to follow you. A lot of people feel this way, but nobody's going to take the first step. So what I'm saying is, take the first step. Do something. Get some people with you. And you'll see people line up behind you like you never knew. There's an army out there, but it's quiet. It needs leaders. And you'll also teach your children something, that there are things that we must stand up for. That's a valuable lesson. It's a lesson they're only going to learn from you. So teach it to them. My friends, it takes boldness to fight back. America has survived external threats of all kinds. There is no outside force that can defeat this great nation. Our greatest threat comes from within, and it is supported by an ever-increasing number of citizens who believe in entitlements without contribution, from a people who feel threatened by the moral standards embraced by people of faith, and by people infected with class envy and enslaved by their political masters who pander to their every need in return for their vote. The current political philosophy that is driving our national agenda poses a greater threat to the survival of our nation than any foreign force we have ever faced. Whether due to total incompetence or malicious intent, it is the clear and present danger that America faces today. If we fail to overturn this radical agenda that is eroding our liberty, we will forever be branded as the generation that refused to fight, the generation that lost the dream, the generation that forgot that this nation was founded under a divine providence to forever be the light of this world. You see, I cannot fathom telling my children and my grandchildren that I allowed the destruction of this great nation to happen on my watch without at least trying to stop it. And now you, each of you have to face that same question and come up with your answer to what you're going to do. And so let me offer you a challenge tonight. Go home tonight Look at your children, or look at pictures of your children and your grandchildren, and then go find a mirror and look into your eyes and into your heart, your mind, your soul, and then swear this to yourself, the words of Thomas Paine. If there be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace. And finally, let me close with the words of Alexis de Tocqueville, emphasizing once again the importance of faith and religion in this country. I sought for the greatness and genius of America and her commodious harbors and ample rivers, and it was not there. In her fertile fields and boundless prairies, and it was not there. In her rich mines and vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius, of her power. America is great because she is good. If she ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. Thank you. May God continue to bless this wonderful country.